As White House Special Counsel Ty Cobb on how President Trump might react if the target of the Mueller indictment ends up being former campaign manager Paul Manafort or former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. Joining me now, Republican Congressman John Faso of New York. Welcome, sir. It's nice to see you. I want to get your reaction to this milestone in the investigation, regardless of who the target of this indictment turns out to be. Won't you agree just how serious Robert Mueller is taking this investigation?
Well, I think Director Mueller, former Director Mueller, is a very serious lawyer. He wouldn't be in this position if he were not. And I just say we shouldn't speculate. We don't know what will happen tomorrow and what shoe may drop. So let's just wait and see what happens.
But in terms of preparation, sir, I'm sure you expect that the Republicans surely will be asked about this tomorrow. So what will your reaction be if it is a big fish, as Manafort or Flynn?
Well, again, we're here the day before. We don't know anything other than speculation. And I'm just going to react when I see what the indictment, if there is one, occurs. And then I'll have a statement on it. But at this point, I really think it's way too premature to speculate since we have no facts.
All right. What would happen if the president is not happy with this indictment? If he ends up firing Bob Mueller? That certainly has been bantered about as a possibility, speculation certainly. But if that were to happen, is that grounds for impeachment?
Well, let's cross that bridge when we get to it, if we ever get to it. And again, I think it's way too early to have that kind of discussion.
You went to Georgetown Law, if I'm not mistaken, sir. Surprised
That's right.
of this leak? I mean, you know the Washington inner workings.
Well, I've been in Washington as a member of Congress for 10 months, but I've followed the system closely for many years, and I did go to Georgetown Law School at night, I would mention, by the way.
Well, congratulations.
And,
that's huge.
The fact is, nothing surprises me in terms of leaks in Washington, D.C. And I do think it's unfortunate that if it's the case that this came out of Director Mueller's investigation, I think that's very unfortunate and highly inappropriate, frankly.
Let's turn now to the new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. It was put out about 20 minutes ago, and it shows the president's approval rating at just 38%. All the compiling of numbers were taken last week after the intense scrutiny over his response to the Niger attack, amid the rising tensions between the president and Senators Corker and Flake. How concerned are you, sir, that the president's response to these two issues in particular are taking a toll on his presidency?
Well, given the beating he's taken from many quarters, I think actually his approval rating is kind of high. But I think the real test for the administration and for Congress is to get things done. And that's why getting the tax bill done right is a critical ingredient to the success of our country. And I think, the politics will be what they are, and the different sides will say what they want to say. But the average person out there just really wants Washington to get things done. They're concerned that we have too slow an economic growth. They're concerned about wage stagnation. And that's, again, why we're working hard to get a tax bill that reflects the need for greater wage growth, better competitiveness for American business, and helping the middle-class families and small businesses survive and grow. That's really what I think the American people wants us to focus on. They're not so much interested, most of my constituents actually in upstate New York don't ask me about the speculation and the parlor games about Director Mueller and this and that about Russia. Very few people actually ask me about that. They say they're troubled because their kids and grandchildren have to move away out of upstate New York because they can't find jobs, and they're worried about the future.
Well, it would seem that you're not a fan of what we expect to have revealed on Monday with the tax code, because regarding the budget, you were among a number of Republicans in New York and New Jersey, joined by others in California and Illinois, who voted against this because of that provision eliminating the state and local tax deduction. You did that because of how detrimental it would be to taxpayers in these states, your state. Have things changed over the last few days? Do you have any confidence that leaders in your party are going to take this off the table when the fine print comes out on Wednesday?
Well, I know that they're working with us. I've had 5 or 6 meetings in the last 3 weeks with leaders, including Kevin Brady, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and the leaders in the Republican House. So we're working hard to try to find an agreement on this issue But I think the key here is to see the fine print as it comes out. The tax code is enormously complicated. We only will know where it affects individual homeowners and ratepayers when we see the brackets where they fall. I'm confident that the vast majority of middle class and even upper middle class taxpayers are going to see a significant tax reduction. But again, that depends, how this is framed is very dependent upon how it affects taxpayers in individual states. And that's why the state and local deduction is important to places like New York State, because we do have, unfortunately, too high state and local taxes.
This passed in the House with less than a handful of a division between the yeas and the nays. How confident are you that this will pass in the Senate?
Well, I think the state and local tax deduction is not as big a deal in the Senate as it is among those of us from high tax states like New York. So there are different interests at play here, but this is going to be quite a game, quite a fight over the next 6 to 8 weeks. It is going to be extremely important for the public to follow this closely, and I know I'm working very closely with the tax writers in our House, but also with local business people in my district, CPAs and others, to make sure that we get this right and that it's right for our district. The key here is get the economy going, growing a lot faster than it is now. The country is slowly going broke because we have too slow an economic growth, and the wage stagnation for middle class and lower middle class wage earners is really affecting the bottom line for families. And so we've got to spur greater economic growth, which will encourage greater wage growth, and that's the key to this entire equation. We have a $20 trillion national debt, and it's only going to grow unless we get much higher economic growth in the country. We're growing at just around 2% now. The first 2 quarters this year, thankfully, are growing closer to 3 or above, and that's where we need to get the economy growing on a sustained basis over a number of years in order to make sure that we have the jobs and the opportunities for people all across America.
All right. Republican Congressman John Faso of New York, thank you for your time, sir.
Alex, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.